Please welcome Fiona McDonnell, VP Global Partner Services.
Hello again, everybody. I get to start the day off and also close out the morning with you, which is a luxury. So welcome to our final session of the morning, Today's Travellers. Now, we know travel changed in the pandemic, but the world is a very varied place. So quite how and where did it change? And what do we as travellers want now that we're back to business again? So what better two people to discuss this with me this morning than two of our regional MDs, Laura and Carlo. Thank you for joining. So I didn't do a deep introduction there, so let me start with some introductions. Laura, would you like to tell the audience who perhaps don't know you a little bit about your role?
Sure, absolutely. Well, firstly, I'm excited to be here. As Fiona mentioned, my name is Laura. I'm the Managing Director for Asia Pacific. I'm based in Singapore, and I've been with Booking almost 2 years.
Wonderful.
And I'm Carlo, so I'm covering Europe, Middle East, and Africa. I've been with Booking for 8 years, and I've spent most of my life in the travel and hotel industry. Very happy to be here. There are many familiar faces in the room, and I'm very eager to connect with many of you.
Wonderful. So we know we've had turbulent times, but we also know we're back. And I think none of us has a crystal ball, which would be great if we did. But we can definitely see that travellers are determined to travel no matter what. And I think our travel trends survey, which we'll come on to shortly, said that 50% of our travellers are saving up to prioritise that. So, Carlo, can you share a bit globally and perhaps with your region of how you see things recovering and what we're seeing in your markets?
Sure. So first of all, 22 was our biggest year ever. It was amazing and stronger than we had expected. And it's the case for also many of you in the room. So we reached in 22 an all-time high 900 million room nights. This represented a growth of 52% over 21. But more importantly, for the first time, we managed to grow. We ended up the year above 2019. So already in 22, we managed to recover pre-pandemic levels. And the growth versus 2019 was plus 6% in volume of room nights. If we look at the revenue, we were plus 13% globally in terms of revenue in 22. This was mainly due to, and you have all seen this if you are in the hotel industry, in the accommodation segment, this was due mainly to a very strong ADR. And if we just look at the last quarter of the year, so Q4, the ADR globally was up 28%. So very, very solid year. And what we have seen is that, and this was not only on the accommodation business, if we look also at the business from our affiliate partners, from our demand partners that Mark introduced you this morning, it was also very solid on this segment. And if you look not only at the accommodation vertical, but all the other trip verticals, we have also seen very strong growth. So the volume of rides almost doubled in 22. The flights, car rentals, insurance transactions, attractions, all grew very significantly. So what we discovered is that travel demand was very resilient in the region, in Europe, Middle East, Africa, and even more resilient than we had expected. And this was not only true for my region, it was also happening in the Americas, where demand was also very strongly resilient. And as soon as APAC opened up, we have seen also similar trends, and Laura will share more with us later on. So that was the first element. What we have also seen, and I will check my notes just to make sure that I do not forget the key elements. Yes, so, and this was happening despite a very complex situation, this very complex macroeconomic, geopolitical situation, the war in Ukraine, rising inflation everywhere, and despite this, demand was very resilient. So the question is, so this was 22, and we all know about this. Now the question is, how is 23 looking? And back in December, it was very difficult to forecast how 23 will look like. And if we just look at the month of January this year was stronger than the last quarter of 22. We grew our room nights in the month of January by 26% versus 2019, and at plus 60% versus 21. So very strong trends also at the beginning of the year. And if we look at the pace, so the volume of room nights that we have in the books for the rest of the year, it's also very solid. It's already above 2019. So that trend remains. We also measure what we call the net intent to stay of our bookers. And when we look at the net intent to stay for stays in 90 days and more, also the trends are very favorable, which means that looking at 23, we are quite optimistic. It should be a very solid year. And then you could ask me, but do we see any changes in the behavior of the travelers? At this stage, despite the high inflation, the idea, the fact that we all have to make some savings, when it comes to travel, we don't see this happening. We don't see our travelers trading down. So they are not looking for lower category hotels. They are not reducing their length of stay. We even see an increase in the length of stay. So very optimistic based on the trends we are currently seeing. So 23 should be a solid year. Now, that being said, month-to-month trends can be very volatile. The future of the economy is very uncertain, in a context of high inflation, interest rate increases. But I was discussing last night with one of the chief commercial officers of one of the largest hotel chains, and we were comparing trends. And basically what we see is that the travel industry used to be a cyclical industry. So basically we would follow the macroeconomic evolution. And if the economy is not good, travel tends to go down. Post-pandemic, it looks like our industry is becoming counter-cyclical. So it does not follow the same trends. The question is, how long is this going to last? But when we look at the upcoming months until the end of the year, it's very solid.
Cool. Are you going to show us some numbers?
Yes, sorry.
No, that's okay. It's always good to see graphically how we're doing here. We like numbers, the booking. But in terms of how things have, rebounded, there's so many things in the backdrop, and things happened in a way that we don't always see, trends. We were waiting for APAC, should we say, to come around. But how did you see things that differ from the way Carlos described stuff in APAC?
Yeah, I think the most exciting thing is this time last year when I was here, we were having a similar discussion about what we were seeing a year ago. And at that point, about 30% of the Asia-Pacific countries were actually open for business. So to be here now, a year later, and we have, with China coming back online early in January, we have now the entire region is open for business. So open to welcome travelers back, but also for our travelers to get out and to come back and experience the rest of the world. So it's an incredibly exciting time for Asia Pacific, but we are following the trend behind the time. So last year, Carlo mentioned, for Booking, it was our biggest year ever. For Asia Pacific, this year will be our biggest year ever. Last year, a lot of our partners were going through a healing process, but we were able to move generally across the region from recovery into growth in Q4 as North Asia started to open. So early in the year, we saw the Pacific opening, and then we followed with Southeast Asia, and there was a lot of learnings across the countries, particularly around flight capacity, things that we saw impact travel across Europe. Earlier, I think there was a lot of learnings that were taken, and then we started to see North Asia come online towards the end of the year, and that's when we really saw a big spike in the opportunity for growth. Now, with China opening, we have really a limitless opportunity to capture that demand of Chinese travelers going back out into the world, but also to welcome travelers from around the world back into the region. Flight capacity now is fast approaching 19 numbers, excluding China at this point. But for the rest of the region, flight capacity is there. But what's interesting about flight capacity, and we're seeing it across the world as well, is that flight patterns have changed. So we talk about the cyclical patterns of travel, but also the trends within flight capacity. The number of flights that were running between city pairs before every hour because of the business travel is now running slightly differently because the trends are different. So while we expect to see flight capacity continue to grow, we do expect it to see it differently, and therefore we'll have a bigger impact on our partners. So I think overall I'm excited for the region. I'm excited for what we will do, where we will take our travelers, and looking forward to our biggest year.
I think it's really reassuring to hear that it's travel's back and actually that we've dealt with stuff which we didn't expect. But I think probably everybody here in this room can relate to the fact that when we're stuck at home for a year, or maybe two in some cases, that things changed and they won't always go back. So in terms of how travelers are booking with us and looking for stuff, Carlo, did you actually see sort of any emerging trends in the patterns of the way we're seeing people booking?
Yes, we do see trends, and there are some trends that we have a lot of data, so we have some trends that we can predict, and you have some trends that you cannot. because it's very difficult to understand how bookers are going to evolve. So the first trend, if we look at 23, we expect more international bookings. If we look at Q4 of 22, the share of international bookings was at 48%. And this was below what we used to experience before the pandemic, where normally the share of international bookings on our platform is the majority, so it's above 50%. So we expect more international travel over the course of the year. If we just look at the first 2 months, January and February, already the share of international bookings was almost at the same level at 2019, at 58%. So this is already happening. And what we see, we expect more Americans traveling to Europe. We expect more Europeans traveling to APAC, but also more Americans traveling to APAC, because over the past few years, it was almost impossible to do so. Well, what we have seen during the pandemic is that there was some international booking, but it was mainly country-to-country corridors that were happening, mainly in Europe. And now we see more intra-regional bookings happening. And this will continue to accelerate during the course of the year. That's the first trend, more international bookings. The second trend, which we could not anticipate, is basically travelers today are booking their spring and summer holidays much earlier than they normally do, much earlier than they were doing before the pandemic. While there is a lot of uncertainty, so we could expect people to wait, they are not waiting, they are just booking earlier than before. We have the feeling that they are trying to secure a good rate before the rate keeps growing. So this is exactly what they are doing. They are securing availability. Mainly they are trying to secure a rate. This is very strong. And if we just look at the months of February, in my region, 30% of the bookings received were for checkouts from May onwards. Very much in advance, much more than we normally see. So that's the second trend. The third trend is, at the same time, we see a lot of last-minute bookings happening for near checkout weekend stays. So people have a very strong intent to travel, and we see a lot of business bookings happening for last-minute weekends. And the third trend is that basically today we all want to work from home. You know, it's nice, we have taken that habit during the pandemic, it's flexible, and travelers want to work from home. And then they have realized that not only they can work from home, but they can work from anywhere. And for our industry, it's a huge opportunity, because this increases the amount of travel. So basically, what we see currently is that the length of stay, it tends to go up, and we see that the weekend pattern is changing. So in the Western world, it used to be a Friday to Sunday, and today more and more it's a Thursday to Monday. So this is also happening. What we see also, which is also surprising, we see that the volume of cancellation tends to be lower than in 2019. Again, this reflects the very strong intent to travel from our bookers, because they book, but they do stay as well. So cancellation is dropping. Well, then you could ask me, but what type of rates are they booking? Basically, still 80% of the bookings that we receive on our platform are made on flexible policies. So the bookers remain very, very cautious about the type of rates they can be booking. Oh, and I have a few trends here. So basically, they are looking for flexibility, they are looking for ease of use, and what we see, they are increasingly relying on tech to plan and to book their travel. 2/3 of the bookings made on our platform are made on a mobile device. So, and if we look at 22, 45% of the room nights booked were made on our apps. So we became a mobile-first company, and now we are an app-first company. 45%. This is 13 points, 1-3, above 2019. So that's also a very strong trend. And I would say the last trend, what we see happening, if we survey our travelers, basically they will tell you that they want to travel much more sustainably. And 81% of the global travelers confirm that sustainable travel is very important to them.
Very cool. I can certainly recognize myself in these things, and I booked my holiday very early. Maybe that's FOMO coming into the travel industry for us. Laura, looking at APAC, I think I've already mentioned we maybe felt that we kept waiting and looking on the world stage as which market was going to move. And there's some very key important source markets there, India, China. Can you bring that to life for us and see how you see that?
Absolutely. I think just to first build a little bit on what Carlo was sharing, across the region, across Asia Pacific, we are still seeing, being a bit behind the curve, that inter-regional and a lot of domestic. So while travelers are getting more confident, and so certainly last year that's what we saw, a lot closer to home trips, but this year we will expect to see that long haul starting to come back. Obviously flight capacity I touched on, but also the confidence of travelers. I know a lot of we did a traveler confidence index survey at the end of last year to get a sentiment of how the Asia Pacific travelers were feeling, and we did it across 11 countries, 11,000 travelers. And what was interesting to see was actually India was the number one as confident travelers, and actually the number one in most conscious travelers for sustainable travel, followed by Vietnam, followed by China. So at that point, China was still very locked down, but they were the third most confident to travel. So I think what's incredibly interesting as we look at those Chinese travelers now, and we all were anticipating last year, when does China open? When do we get those travelers back? In 2019, Chinese outbound travelers spent $255 billion overseas. This is a lot.
Wow.
Million overseas. So this is billion. I can get my numbers. Billion. So this is a lot, and it was 166 million trips taken by the Chinese outside of mainland China. That is a huge loss to us as an industry when they're not able to travel. So with the reopening of China at the beginning of January, we started to track and see what will happen. Everybody thought it was going to be this tsunami of travelers, but obviously that did not happen because the change happened very fast and nothing was ready. So the flights were not ready, the visas were not ready, the passport office was not ready to renew so much. There was a lot happening for China to get ready for this change. So it's allowed us as an industry, and for us, our accommodation partners around the world, to be ready now to start to capture it. And we anticipate to see this year, I mentioned 166 million trips taken in 2019. We anticipate this year 110 million. And that's from the Chinese Outbound Tourism Research Institute have estimated, so about 2/3 by the end of this year. Now let's see what happens. We don't know. We did see those first few months, the travelers, while they said they were the third most confident, actually when it came to it, they realized that they've been inside China for a long time. Now going out, there was also some concerns, right? What if I get sick when I'm traveling? How far away from home am I? There's also a lot of additional regulations were put in place. Countries said PCR tests are back, all things that we'd kind of moved away from. So I think we will see whether or not we get to that 2/3. And certainly right now, flight capacity is only less than 20% in and out of China. And we anticipate to get to 75 to 80% by the end of the year. So, but we are seeing similar trends just in those first few months. To Carlo's point around kind of that booking window, we're seeing shorter booking window for the immediate, but we're also seeing quite a lot of travelers booking for later in the year. The Chinese holidays also, big holidays in May and then through the summer. We'll certainly anticipate to see them coming back into Europe. And you can see through the search data here that the top five searches are all international outside of Thailand, outside of the international beyond the region. So France, USA, Japan, Japan's there, and Spain. So we'll anticipate to see much more coming through the summer of the Chinese travelers. And the length of stay is also lengthening. Traditionally, it was much shorter for those Chinese travelers, but now, again, with the cost of fares, the limited capacity, I think we will expect to see the Chinese travelers coming for longer, and also following a similar trend to what Carlo shared, that they're not changing right now the types of properties that they're staying in. Mm-hmm. So some interesting things to think about the Chinese traveler. But I think what's also interesting is that a lot of countries, destinations, have been looking, what's the alternative? When China was closed, where else are we going to go for our source markets? And so India was top of mind for many people. We know that with a similar population size, and keeps changing almost on the week-to-week basis, which is the larger, but the India traveler has become a focus for many destinations. And we've also started to see, even on our books, the India outbound is significantly larger already since reopening than it was in 2019. So we do anticipate that India will continue to grow their outbound. Their domestic growth has also been significant, but we'll anticipate to see much more outbound, as we've already seen in the first few months. The top search destinations also follow similar patterns, but we are seeing the Middle East in there, Singapore, Thailand, so within the region somewhat, but then also coming into Europe as well. So these are the top searches we see from our India travelers, and they're also staying longer. So we're also seeing the other interesting piece for both the Chinese and the India travelers, and it comes a little bit to the travel predictions, which I know we'll talk on, is the desire to go somewhere different. So traditionally it has been the large tourist attractions. Now these travelers are looking for something different, and both the India and the Chinese travelers are younger. For the Chinese, it was very traditionally group tours. That's what we were seeing the most of. Now we are starting to see, with the younger travelers, more solo, more independent travel, and the same for India. We've got a large demographic that's coming into the middle classes that gives us the capacity to capture that demand.
It's going to be exciting to see how that develops. And I think looking at some of the stuff many of us took for granted, infrastructure there, which I wasn't thinking, capacity, and also what we're looking for. Probably a good segue into our traveller trends. Particularly, so Carl, if you could put up a couple of statistics here. For those of you who may see some statistics around the venue today, so we did a traveller trends survey last year across 24,000 travellers in 32 countries to see kind of what people are thinking about now. Have we changed our relationship with tech, with travel? Do we want more purpose? And what is it that we're sort of looking for? So just having a look in here, reassuringly, we want to get off the grid, which is no surprise after being cooped up for such a long time. But it's also not really a surprise that it's top of mind now to think about wellness, mental health, and all those sort of the downside of having had such a crazy pandemic. But for me, where I light up, and I was quite intrigued with our love affair with tech has not died, in the sense that people, 43% of people, are willing to explore how we look at going some with virtual reality. So almost try before you buy, if you would like, in the world of travel, if you could experience it. But of course, reassuringly, for everybody in this room, a travel and vacation into the metaverse is not going to be enough to stop people actually getting out and going somewhere. So that's the good news in here. But a statistic not on that chart that I'm going to share and then pass to the two of you is, we also saw that 68% of travelers are going to have or be looking for more bang for their buck. So let me start with you this time. Actually, no, let me go with Carla, because I've just heard from you. Do you really think travelers are going to look for stuff on a budget, or will that be a short-lived trend?
It's difficult to forecast. What we can say is that currently this is not happening. So basically, all travelers, so 16% of the travelers, despite they say that travel will always be important and worth it, especially in the current context, 68% say, oh, we will be increasingly budget conscious. We don't see this happening at the moment. Clearly not. Basically, the need to travel has become, post-pandemic, like vital. It's a key source of human happiness. It makes us happy. And we have listened to some neuropsychologists. Basically, they are telling you that travel has become a vital need because it creates endorphins and it makes us happy. So when it comes to make choices, you don't want to cut on your travel. You might save on many other things, but travel is still very important. And this is what we see happening on the current trends.
Yeah. And in APAC, I think I always remember those travelers as being high spenders and actually able to. Has that changed?
Again, not what we're seeing so far. We're certainly seeing that desire, that longer stay that we talked about means that travelers are wanting to spend. But I think what they're doing is saving for it. Maybe before it was regular short trips. Now it's bigger, longer trips that we're saving for, but being very intentional. I think when we talk about discretionary spend, it is allocated now to happiness, which is very much related to travel.
That's a very reassuring trend. Now, each of us travels ourselves quite a lot, so my final question in these moments is really to you in terms of personally, what do you see? We're all back out traveling again, which we welcome to be amongst you again as partners and visit the markets. What are you seeing that maybe surprises you in the way we've got back out traveling again?
I think, and actually it was talked about, I think this morning, for me, the fact that every flight that I take is packed. In every part of the plane. So there is no, if you need to get a flight, you need to book pretty far in advance.
Cascading some FOMO here just in case you're planning on going anywhere.
Yeah, it's, so for me, that's been the biggest one. And to start with, when we're at the airports and we're seeing queues, we were excited about it. Like, oh, this is great, the airports are full. Then you get to the point where, okay, now it's not so fun. Now we just want to get through the airport. But For me, I think, seeing just the people back and now living those experiences. And one of the other trends that came out of the predictions was that people want to switch off when they're traveling. So we are seeing extensions for work, working from anywhere, but they also want to be very intentional about switching off. Over half travelers said, when I'm off, I want to be off. And I'm also feeling the same way. And so I think that I'm seeing it from our travelers, I'm hearing it, but also I know I can relate to it personally, that there is time to travel for work, there is time to travel for fun, and there is time to make sure that the two are quite separate.
Yeah, perfect. I know you travel a lot, Carlo, but do you actually see anything different, or actually you reassured it's back to way?
No, very, very similarly. I think people are eager first to reconnect with their families, with their friends, to reconnect with travel, to discover new destinations. I think that's very important. So the eagerness to travel and the resilience of demand is very impressive. And I think it's even more important than what we could have expected. So really, we have this, last year, but at the same time, I have a big region. We have 70 offices in Europe, and I said, we need to bring our teams together. So I asked every regional manager to organize an event to bring the teams together, and we started in Spain. And it was funny because it was the first time the teams were going back together. And in the morning, it was a little awkward, almost awkward. Well, because 40% of the team were new. So we had to get together again and to be in the same room. At the end of the day, it was crazy. It was back like 2 or 3 years ago. So I think that the need to reconnect, to travel the world, but also to meet with people is very strong. Because we have been frustrated and we have not been able to do that for quite a long period of time.
One of my personal observations is I wonder whether as travelers we become less patient for when the stuff doesn't work because we haven't had some of those glitches by not traveling for a while. And hence, obviously, personally, I'm looking forward to seeing the connected trip smooth that out. But next time you're traveling, just see whether you notice anything like that. And of course, and ask to you as the audience, come and let us know if you're seeing things different that we're not picking up so we can just stretch our minds in different directions. So thank you very much for taking the time and for the detailed answers for the audience here. And with that, this actually concludes our session for the morning. Thank you very much and enjoy your lunch. We'll see you afterwards.
Thank you.